I knew you would be watching. Thank you. You jumped in here early and tuned in for the whole thing. My name is Ray Hill. Actually, the name of the series of program is PAPA, Public Affairs, Public Access, and it is a production of Houston Media Source. But the mini part of that series is called Advanced Citizenship. It's me, and the usual suspect around here is Richard Nibbles. And Richard hails from Lufkin, Texas. He's got a little snub in his jaw, and so if he has to spit, don't hold that against him. That's normal operating temperature in Lufkin, Texas. So it's a country redneck and the city queer going to talk about Texas politics as best we can, from different understandings, different perspectives, and we hope that some of us touch some of the ideas that either irritate you to the point that you'll call in and scream at us, or satisfy the point you'll call in and encourage us. Today we have a special in-studio guest. We've had guests before, but not in studio. And we have Fran Watson. Fran is an attorney. She is also the president and chief operating officer, the way the structure goes, of Houston Gay, Lesbian, and Transgendered Political Caucus. Welcome, Fran.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, tell us a little bit about your organization.
So the Houston GLBT Political Caucus is a 42-year-old organization. It's volunteer-run, donor-funded, and the purpose of the organization is to help advance the rights of the LGBTQ community. And we do that in a few ways. We do it through education, teaching, either working with agencies to show better policies within to help the community, educating ourselves, finding out what's going on in the community, and then getting that information out. And we also, in which a lot of people know us for, is working to endorse and to help elect pro-equality candidates, political candidates, incumbents that stand against discrimination, and ensure that they're working on policies to enact laws that help, that are inclusive.
But your interests are not just about GLBT issues. It's about a broader range of issues.
So equality encompasses so much, right? And so what we're working on, and what we've been working on, is to build like coalitions and to include various issues that do encompass that equality. I mean, we've been working on racial justice issues because LGBT people are part of every single community. We have LGBTQ immigrants, black people, white people, religious folks, non-religious folks, and so these issues all intersect with one another.
So folks bring everything to the table, and you kind of sort out. But your strength is not just among the voting GLBT population.
Oh no, our list, so our membership is, it can get up to 1,000 members depending on what's going on in politics, local or statewide. But our mailing list is large. It's been cultivated since the 70s. And most of our members are, or most of the folks on our mailing list are what we would kind of consider the progressive folks, but they're LGBTQ allies. We go out into the polls during the election time, and you see people coming up to us, coming up to the volunteers and saying that they trust, because what we do is we send out a slate. We endorse a slate of candidates, and then we send out mail. And so we also have a card that we'll hand out at the polls. And so you see people that are not necessarily LGBTQ that will come up and talk about how they know that we vet candidates that are pro-equality, and that because of that, we have folks that are allies that take our card.
And that happens a bunch, right?
Yes.
I mean, the process itself has the respect, because there's not a candidate on that ballot that will not say getting the caucus endorsement is tough. We get grilled very well.
Yes.
And
yes.
so after they come through our process, we've only had a couple of people turn on us after they got the endorsement, and that's amazing. Because politics is a game of which way the water flows. But ultimately, just the great unwashed. I mean, if you're out there and you're a registered voter and you go to the polls and you start off, well, I know who's running for president or governor, and I know all of this, but then you hit the judges. and it is a rat maze, and you don't know anything about any of them. That's where the caucus comes in.
This past election in 2016, we had 51 candidates. Most of them were judges, and everybody doesn't know all the judges. I'm an attorney. I'm a probate attorney. I practice with 4 judges, so I don't even know all of the judges around. But knowing that they've went through the process, we've had lawyers that sat in on the screening, and so people can trust, and people do trust, and we've built this community trust for the past 42 years as to why people can say, oh, we know that if the caucus endorses these judges, we know that these judges will stand for equality and for forward-thinking policies.
And everybody does that giving their time.
Yes, it's all
It's all volunteer.
all volunteer, from leadership to the person that's standing out at the polls. It's all volunteer.
Richard, y'all got anything like that in Lufkin?
No, we just kind of have the old folks sitting around.
On the rocking chairs, and they know everybody.
Well, they play dominoes at the feed store.
Yeah,
They sit around for breakfast at Dean's.
okay.
And that's where pretty much everything gets hashed out.
Word of mouth. Word of mouth. So people got easy to remember names when the election.
Well, most of the folks that are running that people care about, they've known for a while,
Or related to.
pretty much.
Yeah, and that's how Texas works, really. That's how Texas works, because my family's been messed up in politics here for about 3 or 4 generations, and I've had uncles that were sheriffs, and I've had uncles that went to prison. And I have uncles that went to prison because the sheriffs that were also uncles caught them and sent them there. But it's all in the family anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Fran, what are the big issues that you are compelled to deal with in this session?
So the issues that we're dealing with are these these bills that have been introduced that are veiled under public safety. But one, we have Senate Bill 6, and forgive me if I don't know all the numbers, but our 2 big ones are Senate Bill 6, which is the
Potty bill.
yes, and so
Passed the Senate yesterday.
it passed the Senate yesterday, and so now it's moving on to the House.
Anything about the vote by which it passed? It only lost 1 Democrat.
Lost 1 Democrat. It was 21-10. So we're we thank our champions, those 10, we call them the tremendous 10. We thank them for standing up.
Somebody had to vote present.
Yes. And so, and I encourage folks to go on YouTube to listen to Senator Garcia's speech that she gave with the vote, because she did make sure she mentioned, we know that this bill is targeting transgender folks, and she made sure that she talked about transgender lives that were lost. So I encourage people to look at that video. But
Where did they find it?
you can go on YouTube and find it.
In the state
Yes.
website.
But and there's also just a clip on YouTube where it's just her speech, so you can go there. But you
How
can
do
also
you reference by her name?
Yes, it says about her name, Senator Sylvia Garcia. Vote against SB6. So you'll see.
Okay. Yeah, Senator Garcia is a representative who covers kind of the east, half Houston.
And so now we see that it's going to the House, so now we're waiting to see what's going to happen. Hopefully, we know that the committee would be first, so we're hoping that it can get killed in committee. If not, then we have a few chances to make sure that this.
Well, I mean, Stroud.
Yes, and we've been hearing that a
Speaker of the
while.
House, by the
The
way.
Speaker of the House, yes. That's not a bill that they're thinking about in the House. And so this is something, we've even heard him quote, the Senate has their agenda, the House has their agenda. And SB 6 is not part of their agenda.
And Stroud is a representative from San Antonio. He's been there since they dug the river, before they built the Alamo. And he depends on tourism. That's a big part of his district.
Yeah.
And the potty bill confuses nobody like the travel agencies and the tourist and convention business.
And that's one of the things he's been speaking about, is that about the tourists, about the economic impact on, what this bill could have.
All right. Doesn't that kind of create a dilemma for you? I mean, you have every reason to believe that though this has steamed through the Senate with almost no interruption, but there's this drop dead wall in the House. So are you not at risk of using something that's not real in order to activate your people to be involved politically?
Well, we are activated because while we do hear, the speaker speaking, we want to make sure, nothing, we know in politics, nothing is 100%, nothing's guaranteed. So what we want to make sure is that folks are still calling in and voicing, their opposition for this bill to ensure that this bill when it came out of the Senate, we saw that folks were activated. When it was introduced, people became activated, and hours and hours of testimony and people telling so many personal stories coming out in many cases, and so that continues on because while we are moving to this, what we're saying could be a blockade, you just never know, and so you just want to be ready.
Well, isn't it frustrating to have activated all those folks and I'm called their senators? I mean, I call my senators. I mean, it's my duty. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any choice. Call the senator, and since I know my senators and get along with my senators, unlike my representatives in the U.S. House, I gave them a call and told them what I thought. This is a cow, and here's a cabbage, and you put them together, and this is what happens. Mm-hmm. And to talk to the staff, it was nice conversations. Everybody did that, whether they had friendly senators or not friendly senators. Did it change a vote?
Well, we see it didn't change a vote at the Senate, but we see that it is logged. We also see that through all of this process, that one, a vote may have not changed in the Senate. However, elections continue to happen, right? We have Brad Pritchett, who took all of those videos, all of that testimony, and he's made all of these videos. And those videos have gone out. They're out in that where people are able to reference those. We saw them referenced on the Senate floor yesterday during the vote. And so people are seeing these videos, and as they continue on, as we're continuing to activate people, as we're continuing to see folks can see who voted against these bills and what's going to happen at election time.
Rich, you're not concerned to the people in Lufkin, Texas about the potty bill?
Be honest, they don't really give a damn. I mean, they're not fixing to vote for anybody that's going to pay for somebody to go stand around at the door and check somebody's birth certificate to see if they're going to the correct bathroom or not. They simply don't care. And that's the ones that actually go inside to take a leak. The rest of them are around back by the pine tree. And that's pretty much, universal.
Yeah. I used to think that had a gender on it, but it doesn't.
No, not a single one.
Depends on the density of the pine trees.
Pretty much. Nobody cares. This whole bill is being fought in Austin and in places like Houston and Dallas and San Antonio. Get outside of there, nobody cares. For them, it's a laughing joke.
Did you find that heartening, friend?
Well, when you listen to the testimony, when people weren't telling their stories, most of the folks said that this was just a solution looking for a problem. That this was where, this has come out of nowhere, and they never talked about how there are already laws that are in place in these non-discrimination laws that are in place in other cities around the state. So this is good to know, because when you listen to senators or you listen to folks that are voting against us, they're saying their constituents, what happens when we do get further outside of like that bubble, right? What are
it became a big issue in Houston during the referendum because it was used in the media as a weapon.
Yes.
And I saw that happening, and the campaign on their side did not do a good job of responding to that particular weapon. We didn't bunker in and protect ourselves. That we basically ignored the potty training aspect of it because it seemed kind of so weird that who could take it seriously. But apparently a lot of the voters wound up taking it seriously, and they voted on a myth that wasn't true.
That's right. I was like that campaign. And that's why it was good that Senator Miles yesterday talked about the difference between HERO and SB6 because they kept referencing HERO. But one thing that's in common, HERO failed. There was so many lies out there. That myth had been gone a year before the vote had even come up. That was a year because after it passed in city council.
And Senator Boris Miles don't have enough seniority to get a chance to speak very often.
Yeah, and he used it. He used it yesterday.
No. Any senator can grab the microphone and hold it.
That's right.
By the way, you can call in and you can scream at us, or you can interrupt us, or you can give us encouragement. Telephone number is printed right under my breast, and so right there on your television screen. Feel free to do that. You're welcome to do that. I had an eye operation yesterday, so I can't read anything, but I think it's 713-887
807 1794.
1794. Richard's got better eyesight than I, but mine'll get better because it's going to clear up after
There you go.
surgery yesterday. Fran, are you having a good time? Is this good work for you?
This is good work because my philosophy is access for everyone. It's making sure that folks are all on the same level playing field. It's not about one getting more than the other. It's just all of us kind of being even. And if there are opportunities where all of us can come together as a unit and be able to move things forward, then I am down for it and I am in it. So I'm not having a good time hearing these stories, but I am being able to look at community, seeing the community come together, and that to me is inspiring and it gives me hope. So
Where do you come from?
Heuston, I'm a native Houstonian.
Yeah, I mean, but you're a lawyer too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a distance.
Yes, so I'm a estate planning and probate attorney, so wills and trusts and things like that. And because I'm not a litigator, it affords me some time so that I am able to be out and do this work.
Yeah, it's costly to do. It's just like the chair of the Democratic Party of Harris County is not a paid position.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And Lane Lewis was a special education teacher who worked in that capacity for several years. Did a remarkable job in 2016. It was a remarkable year for all of us. And Lane gets a lot of credit for that. But then his successor is one of the Schechters.
Right, yes, Lily Schechter.
Lily, yeah. Okay. Lily's going to take that over, and she's related to the ambassador, and she's related to Sue Schechter. And so she has a political background behind her. But that, too, is a volunteer job.
Yes, it's a volunteer job. We talk about it as my wife Kim. She says it's like the caucus on steroids because it's so massive.
It is. It's a bigger job.
It is.
And all that. Now, technology. How you doing with? Jack Belinsky is a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, kind of mentored Jack into the media. And Jack tells me that because of the technology, he can take the caucus list and compare it to the daily results from the early voters and know who on the caucus list has voted.
Let me tell you, Jack worked so hard during the 2016 election and using that, doing the comparisons on the list, because we were able to fundraise, because he was able to do that, find out who was voting every day, knowing how to cull our list to see who we need to send the card to.
No sense in notifying somebody to go to vote if they have already voted.
That is right. And so we were able to fundraise and get some money to send out a second card, which was great. Because of the work that he did, we were able to send it out to voters that may have not already voted, I think because he had that list.
I think he told me that before going into Election Day, from the end of early voting going into Election Day, that 54% of the caucus list had voted. That's remarkable. All in early voting.
Yes. Election day, he gave the final numbers. I can't think of I can't remember the final numbers, but yes, before Election Day, 54% of the voters had voted, and that list went out to, I think it went out to 35,000 people, and so that was remarkable.
So we were real players.
Yes.
in the November election?
I thought the party did a great job, but I also want to make sure that folks know, it was a lot of these fringe organizations as well that kind of came together to ensure that, being a part of that. So you had the party, then you had TOP. And
By
the
fringe
caucus.
organization, you're talking about coalition.
Yeah,
partners.
the coalition. So like TOP, like the caucus, United with Dream. And so all of these organizations kind of come together to help move the election.
What role do you think Orlando played with that?
I think Orlando did play a role in that because, once again, we can talk about difference all the time. We do talk about difference all the time. But when you talk about loss and you talk about people getting killed, I mean, loss happens in every community, everywhere. And so I think that mothers losing sons, LGBTQ community going down, marginalized communities dying, I think that started a whole conversation.
Actually, I was with you the very day that Orlando came down, and
It was our anniversary.
It was your anniversary party. It had already been scheduled, and we turned it into a media event, or you turned it into a media event. And we were able to bring together the current mayor, the junior past mayor, and a bunch of politicians. And then the next few days, I went over to Montrose Center, and there was a news conference where the Muslim imams from all over the city gathered with the Catholics and the mainstream Protestants. Second Baptist Church didn't show up, but the Methodists and the Episcopals and the Presbyterians and the Unitarians, of course, showed up. And in one room, we had people that had not gotten along well together, that were suddenly unified in the face of tragedy to prevent the infection of prejudice after a violent crime based on prejudice evolving against the perpetrator or anybody else. We're going to stand together against prejudice. I met my first mufti that day.
See?
And I did not even know what a mufti was. Mufti is, if you don't know, is apparently kind of a bishop over the imams. And he was a young guy. All the imams were getting on up there, but the mufti was kind of a young guy. And very sincere about, we don't want this tragedy to turn into another, and what can I do to help your community gain its direction? You don't get offers like that across your transom every day.
No, we work in silos. We may not mean to, but it just happens that way. And so we work in silos, and when you have these major events, this breaks those silos and it brings us all together, and we learn about folks or positions or that we wouldn't have even known about. But now we're able to kind of come together and have a conversation. Some of the folks that were against Hero the year before, we ended up standing next to them during that time. We had a conversation about, guns and violence and things like that. And so all of the...
Your caucus has always taken a position on guns and violence.
Right, but I'm saying all of us...
I know, but the thing about it is you didn't really have people to talk to before that might have different positions.
Right.
And now suddenly you can walk in and talk to anybody about anything.
Right, well, we talk about 287G, with Sheriff Gonzalez ended. We had found out we'd already taken a stand against it in 2009 when Chris Banks was the president of the caucus. And so it's easy for us when we take these positions.
I remember that debate.
Remember? That's what I was wondering. Were you there for that?
Yeah, I actually showed up. I don't go to the caucus meetings very often, but I actually showed up, was on the floor debate for that one. And I talked about Patricio Bravo and his wife, Erica, because Erica was getting her green card about that same time. Took 16 months and $30,000 for the wife and mother of 2 American citizens to get her papers from Mexico.
Wow. Yeah. So we're
That's too long and too much.
That's, oh my gosh.
I still think guns are something they discuss in the city. because
No,
we
you got
just
guns
laugh
falling
at
off
it.
the, you got guns falling off the wall.
I tell you, you know, and over here it's such a big thing if you see somebody carrying a gun. I mean, in East Texas, if we see somebody, usually they're the butt of a joke. Nobody cares. Everybody has them. Nobody carries them because nobody cares. I mean, literally, it's like the idiot I told you about at the store when I was Christmas shopping. Literally, he was the butt of a joke for a week because nobody carries them because nobody actually cares.
Richard, my family had guns because in the previous generation, we needed protein for the table.
Yeah.
Literally. Raymond hunted all of his life, but he was a lousy shot and his eyesight was never corrected properly.
That's what they made
So
shotguns
he
for.
never killed anything. I think he killed one buck in self-defense because he was going down a narrow alley and the buck was coming up, and in order for one of them to make it, he had to shoot him with a shotgun in that narrow space. And so it was kind of self-defense killing. But other than that, I don't think Raymond ever killed in that. Frankie tells the story of keeping a squirrel up a tree, isolated tree in the yard, until Raymond came home because they only had one .22 shell left, and he wanted to make sure that they got the squirrel because she was going to cook it for supper and did. Made it with dumplings to stretch it. That's country folk. That's my folks, it's country folks. I'm the first generation of Hill males that did not push a mule through a field for a living.
Oh.
That's country.
Yeah, I have family
Yeah, well,
in the country.
we just had cows.
Yeah.
Yeah, we,
We got hungry, pick the one you want for supper.
there you- I am pretty urban, so
Yeah.
I will
Yeah, but-
admit.
but-
I
but-
will admit.
Now, okay, that brings up an interesting question. That brings a very interesting question. Considering the urban nature of Houston, of Texas politics, and some politicians come to the city and got to make city folks happy, and the rural nature of Texas, which is in reality always been the mainstay
It's a larger.
of Texas economy. You know, when they run out of cotton, they got oil. They mechanized, and small farms went away, bigger farms came in, and then everybody got rich off of the oil. But it's still a rural culture and an urban culture, and they come together every 2 years in Austin and do some of the most amazingly horrible things.
Yeah. But you know, it's like over here, if somebody has a gun, oh my God. In my high school, pick a pickup in the parking lot. We're not talking about the teachers, we're talking about the students. You're gonna find a shotgun and a deer rifle in every single one of them. No ifs, no ands. Nobody was worried about who had a pocket knife, because we all had a pocket knife. I mean, you got to cut the bales of hay because you had to feed the cows before you went to school. I mean, here it's like, y'all got metal detectors and everything else. We don't have any of that stuff. I helped referee over the last couple of weeks the basketball small school shootout. You wouldn't find a metal detector anywhere in any one of the schools that I was refereeing in.
The only rules deal with dribbling the ball when you run.
Well, that depends if you're watching the little 6 and 7-year-old girls, if you're getting them to dribble the ball at all. But those little girls are mean to each other. Whew. They were tossing each other around the floor to make a football game look tame.
Well, beyond the potty bill, Texas legislature deals with a lot of stuff that affects all of us. I have been concerned with the priorities about the money. Seems as if every session of the legislature, somebody is going to cut taxes on those folks that got a lot more money than me and then cut the delivery of services to people like me to compensate for it. Why do I have to pay for rich folks' tax cuts?
That is $1 million question. But, we talk about folks that are in power, and folks that are in power have money and want to keep that money, which I want folks to have money. I want
You're an estate lawyer.
Yeah. But I think
There's a dribble in that field.
But the mechanisms that we use, using the legislature to do that, when we have to ensure that we're protecting all Texans or making sure that there are programs that are in place. We see that they're cutting funding from the pre-K program, and you can even talk about like party lines, but that's even something that the governor was wanting money for, and that money's being cut. And so I think it's just folks in power having this, wanting to keep that.
Well, if there's more of us than them, can't we politically muscle that around?
Well, that's the thing. I think people have depended on the fact that apathy exists, voter apathy exists. And so we can continue on. The Capitol's hadn't had all these visitors, all these folks, 500-600 folks lining up at the Capitol all of a sudden. It was business as usual. But I think now that voter apathy is starting to turn. And so people are paying attention, people are activated. And so now that muscle can start working. We just hadn't used them. We had muscles that we weren't using.
Well, we didn't have a Donald Trump before.
Yeah.
And that's what's getting people off their backsides.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not going to be on the ballot.
As the Washington Post put it, our current salesman in chief.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to be on the ballot for 4 years or 3.5 years now.
Well, his screw up, people aren't blaming him for his screw ups. They're blaming the folks that are in front of them, which are the folks that are going to be running in 2 years, the people that have their local offices down the street, that they show up. They're the ones that are going to catch the brunt of his screw-ups.
Well, I used to have Friend's job. And I know that what you do in odd-numbered years, the legislature meets this is 2017, it's an odd-numbered year. It meets from January the 1st until the end of May, the beginning of May. It's 5 months every 2 years. And then it's going to be another year for an interim election where the governor's running for it and the lieutenant governor. But the lieutenant governor is easy to organize around because he is such kind of extreme nut that you can look at him. The attorney general's a crook, so you can get a turnout on that, and you can get a turnout. The governor is almost pablum. I mean, he draws a lot of sympathy in the wheelchair, but when he rolls that wheelchair up to a microphone and says, we're going to cut off Medicaid help for handicapped children, they're looking at the wheelchair and listening to what he says, and it don't quite compute.
Mm-hmm.
But to get ready for next year's state and county interim election, we would muscle up during the city election, because everybody cares who's mayor. Everybody gets excited about the mayor's race. And the caucus would use the city election as an opportunity to register voters, get on the polls and muscle up, and then hope that they can hold the wind until the following year. We do not have a city election this year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Well, I don't think that suit has a fart's chance in outer space. But
Well, see, you were talking about though canceling Medicare and Medicaid. Well, Trump come in and said that he's not going to cut Medicare, he's not going to cut Medicaid. They bring out the bill. What's the first thing on the chopping block? And that matters to folks. And while this year they're still have the carryovers of Obamacare next year when these people start losing their insurance and they start losing their Medicare, their Medicaid, they're going to be looking for somebody to blame. And whoever's the first one up on the elections next year, guess who's fixing to
The
catch
incumbent's
hell?
going to catch hell.
It don't matter what party you're in, if you can't explain how you tried to prevent it, it's been nice knowing you.
Fran, can you make that play?
That's what we're working on. And I think the whole goal of that is why the coalitions are so important, because we're all coming together so we'll know one another's issues and we can talk about these various issues, and so that we are, because let me tell you, folks are not only just looking at one party, they're looking at both parties. They're saying who was quiet during all of this, who could have said something and didn't say anything, who could have used the muscles that they had in office and didn't. So folks are coming together and strategizing and organizing, and they're looking at whatever election is coming up.
I'm going to talk to these folks right here for a while. My name's Ray Hill. The name of this show is Public Affairs, Public Access, but this series of this show is called Advanced Citizenship. At the table with me, I have Richard Nebels. He's from Lufkin, Texas, and that's real tobacco in his jaw. And next to him, or between him and me on this bench, is Fran Watson. She is the current president and chief operating officer of Houston Gay, Lesbian, and Transgendered Political Caucus. She comes as the leadership of a very fine organization, but she's the best president that organization has ever had, including the time I was president, because she's got resources at her disposal now that none of her predecessors ever had, and guess what? It is working. You are invited to be part of the show by simply picking up the telephone and calling in. Mark's going to answer the phone, and I don't know what he tells you, but basically, we want to hear what you got to say. You can leave the dirty words out of it, but the rest of it we're interested in. But you can argue with us, or you can bring up things that we haven't brought up. But the idea of public access, public affairs, is a program for you to participate in. And so just do that. Telephone's handy. Telephone number is right there on the screen. Give us a holler and join the conversation. Grant, this kind of show is a very valuable show. Mm-hmm. It's a very good opportunity to come in here and talk about these issues to a broader audience. And the nice thing about it is that it's not only going to play live tonight where people can call in, but they're going to repeat this sucker 5 or 6 times over the next 2 weeks.
Good.
So we're going to catch the insomniacs at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're going to catch the druggies between then and dawn. And they're going to have all different kind of conceptions over what we got to say. But I think what I hear you saying is we've had some tough times. Orlando is not a pleasant thing even to think about. The loss of Hero is not something that we all look forward to. But there's still hope in your voice. Tell us about that.
The reason why there's still hope in my voice is because while we saw that, Hero, went down based on lies, we saw that, Pulse happened. But out of all of these, we see, even after Hero failed, we saw people starting to organize. We saw folks starting to come together. And to me, the power of the people is so important. People knowing their power and knowing that folks that are in government are public servants. And they say it all the time that we are a public servant, and we work for the people. And so when people realize that their power, then it moves the needle. And so I think we're able to move the needle as we organize and folks get activated. And so that's why there's hope. And we see that Mayor Turner, when he came into office, he did something. He did the LGBT advisory board, which is something that we didn't think that would happen, and he did it immediately when he came on. We see that there are non-discrimination ordinances in cities across Texas. We saw that when President Obama was in office. that he was one of the most pro-equality sitting presidents, and so we saw policies that were going forward. So policies do happen because people speak up, because people are together, and so that's why I keep hope.
What's the potential of this new coalition building of doing something about racism that still exists in the gay community and homophobia that still exists among black people?
I think what it is, what's happening is that dialogue is happening. What's happening is that we're actually, one, recognizing one racism exists, recognizing one homophobia exists, recognizing that erasure is still happening. And now folks are starting to have to come together and be in these rooms, and we have to recognize that. And so because of that, we're able to change the conversation. Not easy, and it's kind of long, but as the conversation changes, I stand next to someone who would have been calling me out of my name, but we stand together and we starting to learn about one another so we can move forward together.
You're being out in public and just saying, as you said a few minutes ago, talking about your wife.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I wouldn't have done that.
There was a time when that didn't happen.
Nope.
But you're doing that openly affects other relationships, not just within the black community, but Hispanic women and men who live together as same-sex or same-gender couples are encouraged by that. You know, I come from an era, I remember I was campaigning for Mickey Leland to replace Barbara Jordan in the House of Representatives. Barbara's still alive, but she had retired and Mickey was taking that reign. And we were in Barbara Jordan's father's church, Holman Street Baptist Church. And Mickey were in opposing pulpits, giving that two-pulpit black service political speech. It was wonderful to work with Mickey. And when it was over, an auntie on a walker came up and she said, "You sure can preach." And I said, "Thank you, Auntie. I used to do that regular." And she said, "Really? Not in this kind of church?" I said, "No, ma'am, but I always enjoyed the services more over here." She said, "I think gay people is special." And I said, "Oh, you don't know the dumb queers I know." And she said, "You take our Miss Barbara Jordan." She brought Barbara right out of the closet.
Wow.
In the front of her father's church, as if, because she always knew, and every other member of that church knew, but they weren't ever allowed to talk about it because they didn't have anybody to talk to about it. So just presence is liberating. Excuse me, I got to slip in a Barbara Jordan story.
No, look, you can talk about Barbara Jordan all day.
Oh, he can talk all day without question.
Well, I mean, I can.
First time I ever drove him to Austin. Picked him up, drove to Austin, had lunch, drove all the way back, had a complete conversation. I said 3 words the whole trip. "I need gas." That's it. Other than that, he did not stop from doorstep to doorstep.
I've been known to upstage just a little bit, but then I'm ready for my close-up. No, Chicago called me and asked me to draft what they said on the GLBT walk for Barbara Jordan. And I thought about it, and I passed it on to Brian Riddle of Rice, because I knew he could do it more concisely and get it across. It doesn't say Barbara's gay anywhere in there except the last sentence is survived by her longtime companion. That's all that's on there about being gay, but Barbara belongs on that walk. Again, I'm Ray Hill, and you all disappoint me. You haven't called in. Surely you got something to say. You can scream at me for out and Barbara Jordan on today's show, but I've done that before, so that's no big deal. Fran is You're a valuable asset to the community and a wonderful guest for the show. Do you actually go to Austin, or do you manage things from here and keep in touch with people in Austin?
So I've been going to Austin for a few things. Mostly it was when sessions started, not really, because I know they were getting everything. But in March,
You can write February and the early part of March off.
Right. So we've been going up there. The caucus, we had our first advocacy day, and so it was about 65 of us that got on a bus, and some drove up to Austin this past Monday, and we were talking to our elected officials, folks that were constituents. They were grouped to go talk to their representatives, and so this was our first time doing that. I've also been up there a few times. One to mostly for the committee hearing. So I did the committee hearing for the SB4, the Anti-Sanctuary Cities Bill. So I spoke last night at the House committee hearing, and then last month at the Senate committee hearing, and then for SB6, the committee hearing last
House or Senate?
In the Senate when we were up. I was one of the last speakers. Ashton and then Crystal, and then one more gentleman. We were the last group. There were 29 panels that were speaking, and those panels had 12 people on each panel. And so we were there till 5 o'clock in the morning. We spent the night. That was the first time I'd ever spent the night in the Capitol.
Oh, that's not unusual.
Yeah, I'd never.
Those committee meetings, it'll say committee will begin at the end of the House business, and that may not be until late in the evening, and then it'll run over into the night. They actually have an opportunity to work for their money during the session.
They were up all night and they stayed there, and then they did the vote out of committee, in Senate, and then we saw what happened yesterday. But so I've been up there for a few times, and then Monday, all of the big organizations, they're going to do this Equality Coalition. They're doing the All In for Equality Day, so it'll be strictly LGBTQ folks. So like HRC, TFN, Texas Freedom Network, ACLU, and Equality Texas. They're hosting Intent.
Well, interesting in the potty bill. Most of the really poignant testimony has not come from transgender people themselves, but from their parents.
Yes.
Parents of very young
kids.
Children.
That's some of you would see, like Erica Aaron Ritchie and Landon. Landon is a trans teenager, and his dad just started talking about, not talking about Landon, but really his testimony focused on Landon's sister, because you see the testimony, you see how we talk about transgender youth, we're talking about transgender folks, and then we're also seeing that it affects so many people. This gentleman Dylan put on his Facebook post, we were talking about how it affects transgender folks, it affects intersex people, it affects gender nonconforming, non-binary people. But then he started on his post, he said, this affects tall people, this affects breast cancer survivors, anyone that could kind of look like they may not go into this restroom, then that could be an issue. I was saying that I have a deep voice, and so if I'm in the restroom and you hear me but don't see me, that could be a problem. And so it's just talking about how this bill affects so many people. And so I think seeing how during that
Richard had figured out how to make money off this. He was going to train and organize the potty monitors, the people outside the door that said, let me see your
I was like, what?
birth certificate. And I was going to go into the miniaturization, put your birth certificate in a little, one of those plastic covered cards.
Right, and the lamb,
Right. Just like a driver's license. So let me see your birth certificate. Here you go.
I was like, you go to the club. It's like going to the club once, and then you have to do it again when you go to the restroom.
At the clubs it don't matter.
You just show it and go.
At the clubs I go to, if it don't know, if you can't tell the difference, honey, don't make none.
But it's like you have to carry all kinds of documents. Jeez. And so I think that's why these bills are because it's like, are people having to walk around with briefcases of documents? It's just...
No, the first Hill versus Houston case, the first one, was let me see your driver's license. And the response was Kroll. He said Raymond. He knew who I was. Let me see your driver's license. I said, Kroll, I don't need a driver's license in the basement of this courthouse. I went to jail. We went to court, kicked the ass in federal court. Judge Connor was very impressed with the testimony from the then acting police chief, Tommy Mitchell. Tommy said, we got to know who we're dealing with in the police business, even if we have to tattoo numbers on them. Judge Connor was Jewish. That did not go over very well. So ultimately, people with government power do it to themselves. And it's our job to point out that the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah, and I think...
But folks in East Texas know who's got clothes and who don't, and don't care.
Pretty much.
And that's and that's a good thing to know as well, because you hear people say, "Oh, well, obviously everyone's not talking about this."
Actually, here on the news, they get very serious about it. Watch the news in other parts of Texas. It's the punchline
See,
that people actually care.
News anchors use it that way.
Yeah.
They got news. They got to talk about the blood on the freeway. They got to talk about who got robbed, and they got to talk about who got beat up, and they got to talk about who got robbed and stolen, missing stuff, big tractors and oil rigs gone missing, and they do all that, and then they get around to, well, let's lighten up. They talk about the potty bill.
Right. That's a light moment, you know.
And potty training is now a big issue in the 21st century.
I just never thought that I'm 39 years old that I would be talking this much about restrooms. I just did not think that
It
would
just
be
did not occur to you. That was going to be the big deal.
Right. I just did not think that. So.
Well, Fran, what are your plans for the caucus? What does it look like?
So right now, it looks as if we'll get through session, but in the meantime, while session is still going on, we'll be preparing for elections. That's our bread, our butter.
Your bread and butter is that card.
Yeah.
And the screening candidates. But what have you got? Half a dozen school races countywide?
That's what they're looking at now. So we'll be doing the school races. And if we end up having city elections, so be it. But for now, I think this will be an opportunity.
You know, the caucus could be killer in these school elections.
Well, that's what we're thinking. It's a time to activate that.
Because you're activated because of what's going on in the legislature and what happened with Hero. There's still some residual Hero anger, and anger is good energy. And you can plow that, and then you can get real serious about who sits on the school board in the various districts. There's Spring Branch District. We got voters up. You know, I was thinking the other day, when back in the late 50s, early 60s, I was the only queer in town that you saw in the media. And I had to go in the media because nobody had role models. But now there's a transgendered person living with another transgendered person in every trailer park in Harris County. There are lesbians that live in every country town within reach of the media. I get calls from lesbians in Centerville and Cornrow, and they're not closeted either.
Right.
So that's over with. That closet day and role models is over with. It's our responsibility to role model being such involved and effective citizens that the next generation will follow suit, and we can perpetuate this movement. And ultimately, everybody will have a better chance of being a little equal, a little understood, a little less likely to make other people uncomfortable, a little more acceptable in all walks of life. See it that way?
Yeah, because, you know, one of the things we talked about is the word tolerant was always the word, right? It was like, be tolerant of certain groups, be tolerant of certain people. And now it's getting to a point where it's more than being tolerant, but it's like folks being affirmed and people being celebrated and folks being able to be in, whether they're in a trailer park in what city? Let's come down, you know?
Yeah, Cut and Shoot, Texas.
Yes.
Hey there.
Right, but folks are celebrated for who they are, and just being able to live. You know, folks are not trying to get into the spotlight or trying to put all their get out there and do all these interviews or testifying. They're just trying to live, but they have to come out to do this so they can live, and so that, like you said, the next generation can live, right? And so,
Richard, I think it used to be that way. What's that breakfast place in Lufkin?
Dean's.
Dean's. Kind of equal game,
Yeah, they don't so much worry about it there.
or anybody. No. There was a time
You know, here in the city, I lived here for 30 years. They worry about who's gay, who's straight, who's black, who's white, who's Mexican, who's whatever. In East Texas, they don't much give a damn.
they might comment, you like your eggs funny.
No, I don't really even care about that. You know, because they worried about they got to do. Now they're not, you know, their neighbor is going to be one of the above. And when they need help, their neighbor comes, helps them. They'll go help them. You have a select few of bad apples, if you will, but you got some of them wherever you go. But these issues are more city issues than they are in the country because people just don't simply care. But I guess that's because everybody here lives on top of each other, that they into everybody else's business. In East Texas, they got a little more room to spread out, and they
What
don't
goes
really
on in the
care.
house a mile away ain't your business.
Pretty much.
Richard, got to wrap it up. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight, or whenever you see this, because this will play at various times of the day. But this kind of programming is relatively rare. It's where people come out here and Fran's trying to convince you to be a better citizen. Richard is trying to convince you to be a better citizen. And it would benefit me a lot if you were real serious about being registered to vote and being ready to go to the polls on election day. This country works only because we participate in making this country work. My name is Ray Hill. I want to thank Fran, and as always, my co-conspirator, Richard Nebels, for being on Advanced Citizenship, part of Public Affairs, Public Access. Thank you.